Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Phocuswright's Senior Vice President of Research, Douglas Quinby.
You're not supposed to sit there. Who let you there? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to center stage at the Phocuswright Conference. We have so much to talk about over the next day and a half, so I'm going to kick things off with a little bit on the state of digital travel in 2017. We're going to talk about the size of the opportunity, some of the big themes that are at play, and give each of you a sense of where you fit in. So let's start with this. 1.6 trillion. This is the size of your pie. There are other figures out there that are larger that talk about economic impact and so forth, but that's not this. This is what you sell. This is also a little bit bigger of a number than what we've done in the past, and there's a reason for that. Yes, there has been growth, but we've also added two segments into our market sizing. One, private accommodation, part of that green accommodation lodging segment, and also activities, tours, activities and attractions, things that travelers do in destination. These are two very interesting, dynamic, fast-growing slices of this pie, and we're going to talk a bit about both of them on center stage. So, we are now well into the third decade of online travel. And I think by this time, it's pretty safe to say digital travel, online travel, is travel. Pretty much every traveler, anywhere, with a few exceptions, they're doing something online on some device related to their travel activities. There's an extended multi-market study we did with Google and others. You can see the vast majority of travelers, well over 90%, across most of these markets, at some point, travel-related, doing something on a device. And there's a theme here. We see as online markets mature, they look more and more and behave more and more like the total travel market. Here we're looking at a view of the US market over the past 2 decades. So those trend lines, online and total, they begin to look very similar as the markets mature. You can see the last 2 recessions, online travel kind of did okay. That next recession, when it happens, and it will happen, I'm not so sure we are going to get off quite so easy. And this is a theme that we see play out all over the world. As markets grow, as they mature, growth slows. This could be one of the questions weighing on the mind of the market, as we've seen what's been happening with the big online travel brands over the last couple of days. Now, there are exceptions. China, for example, as you can see, it's like an exception in so many ways. We'll be talking quite a bit about China. There's also Brazil over there on the right. We're rooting for you. Hopefully things will improve. I think things are looking better. Now, let's look at mobile travel. What's going on here? Probably the biggest story, the biggest theme, actually isn't taking place here at all. We all know what's going on. It's on the other half of this world. If we look at mobile penetration, that is, the share of online bookings that are made on mobile devices in Asia, so far ahead of what's happening in the US, in Europe, it's extraordinary. And of course, there's one big engine that's driving so much of this. We all know what that is. In fact, if you took mobile bookings within China and you isolated it as its own separate market, it would be the 3rd largest travel market in Asia. So more bookings are made on mobile devices in China than the totality of travel sold in Southeast Asia or in Northeast Asia. So not surprisingly, mobile penetration in China is completely off the charts. So let's look at this via a channel perspective. Online travel agencies and supplier brands, airlines, car rental, hotel. So here we're looking at the pie of mobile gross bookings in the US. You can see OTAs account for a slight majority, but what's really interesting, right, as we all know, the vast majority of those OTA bookings coming through 2 organizations, So it gives us this sense already just how far ahead online travel companies are in the mobile arena relative to supplier brands. If we look at this in terms of apps, whether it's by downloads or by monthly engagement, online intermediaries just so far ahead of airline and hotel brands. It's extraordinary. Now, let's look a little bit more deeply into accommodation. Airbnb has more downloads by a factor of 2 than the top 10 hotel branded apps combined. Really pretty extraordinary. So, since we're on this theme of online travel agencies and online intermediaries versus suppliers, let's talk about this a little bit. Right? This is our industry's beloved soap opera. Right? It goes on and on and on. So we'll dive in. First, airlines. This is actually kind of interesting. It's been more or less, I wouldn't say steady state, but not the kind of contention, at least publicly, that we've seen in other sectors. Airlines a bit more competitive up the funnel for a variety of reasons. Now, still some really interesting things going on, certainly in Europe with 2 new large airline carrier groups following in the footsteps of Lufthansa. Anyone with a stake in air distribution in Europe is going to have a pretty interesting 2018. Now, hotels, pretty different picture here. It's pretty clear, right? Hotel brands playing second fiddle to OTAs across most of these markets. The US is an exception. And there's been lots of good reason for hotel brands to be a bit concerned. We've seen this over the past several years. Online travel agencies, and especially the big OTA organizations, just so outpacing and outperforming the total travel market and certainly hotels. So how have hotels been fighting back? So we all know the answer. However, we at Phocuswright, we have a different name for this, and there's a good reason for it, really a very fundamental truth. Membership does not equal loyalty. Now, don't get me wrong, I know some of these initiatives from the hotel companies have been quite effective, right? I mean, who doesn't love free Wi-Fi and great deals, right? And they've been very good at getting more and more travelers into the top of that funnel. However, does that really create new loyal customers? So we asked members of loyalty programs, how likely would they be to book outside of their program? And I think the numbers speak for themselves. So here's a little loyalty trivia. What lodging brand has the most customer loyalty? You could define loyalty and measure it a whole number of ways, especially measuring the success of loyalty programs. But we take a kind of narrow, conservative view. Repeat booking, right? True customer loyalty. How often does your customer come back and book again and again? So we looked at lots and lots of booking data, and here's the result. What's kind of interesting, too, the brand that's on top is the one that doesn't have a loyalty program yet. So what is the moral of this story? For me, it's a reminder of just how hard customer loyalty, true customer loyalty, is. It's so hard, and especially in our industry. But I think it's also a sector that's actually really ripe for innovation and reinvention. So, on the topic of reinvention and what's new, let's talk a little bit about what's next. So with this, I actually could go on and on. There's so much we have to talk about. I'm just going to highlight a few things. First, tours and activities. So for those of you who've been following us at Phocuswright, and actually me personally, this is a drum that I've been beating for some time, but I've got good reason. This market is really big. It's the 3rd largest sector of travel. And I know that, sometimes we get criticized for this. People question the numbers, and that's actually part of the deal, right? That's part of the job, and that's good. So let's just say I'm wrong. right? I'm actually not, but let's just assume that I'm wrong. Let's say I'm off by half, right? Even if it's a $75 billion market, that's still actually a nice market. But that's not even what's really important about this, right? What's really important, first, is that more and more consumers want more and more of this stuff. We see it very clearly. And by the way, this is the best part of travel. I mean, I'm sorry, hotels, but this is why most people travel in the first place. And the real revolution behind this, what's going on, it's the plumbing, it's underneath the scenes. Right? More and more of these companies, hundreds of thousands of small suppliers around the world are getting plugged in and wired up. This is the transformation that is already underway and is going to drive so much. Next. Okay, what about voice and AI?
I don't have an opinion on that.
Well, actually, I do. I try to use as many of these products as I can. Quite honestly, I love you guys, but we got some work to do, right? it's so early. However, I think we also all have a sense, right, that we are on the cusp of not just a buzzword or a trend, but there's something deeper. We're on the cusp of a platform shift, and we'll spend a lot of time talking about these two topics over the next day and a half. Number 3, blockchain. So some of you could be experts on this, right? Some of you could be more like me, and you're trying to read as much as you can and talk to as many people as you can and try to figure out how you should think about this. So wherever you may fit, I encourage you to attend the presentation tomorrow by the amazing Norm Rose. It's going to be 12 minutes, very well spent, to walk us through blockchain and its implications for travel. So there has been a really interesting thread. There were a couple, well, I wouldn't say interesting, but a couple of articles that I've read about blockchain. This, because of the possibility, I guess, of disintermediation of our big intermediaries, that there's going to be this thing where big OTAs are going to get together and put up this wall of defense and inhibit all of this innovation, right, and stop blockchain. So I read some of this stuff, and frankly, I thought it was pretty amusing. But it is actually part of a thread that has been gaining some momentum within our industry for some time. Right? It is this idea, right, that we have certain companies that have become so big, that are so far out ahead, and it's created all sorts of debates and questions about our industry and what's next. Where can innovation come from? And it's, by the way, this is not just an issue in our industry. This is something that is happening now across every industry and really touching so many aspects of our lives, even in politics in Washington. Now, one of the most amazing things about this conference, what I love, is that we assemble the smartest, the savviest people in our industry. So I know each of you has an opinion about this. However, I do believe very strongly in the possibility of reinvention in our industry year after year, and the power of innovation, of new technology, extraordinary new products to fuel that reinvention. This is why I think we're all here. This is what we are going to talk about over the next day and a half. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to center stage at Phocuswright. Let the conversation begin. Thank you.